Welcome everyone to another episode of the Training Improvement Café. And in this series, we explore the different categories of our growth training improvement model. Every episode, I invite guests from all over the world to share their story on how they help people learn. And for this specific episode, I was triggered by the launch of a new book because, I think there's a lot to unpack when it comes to instructional design and creating courses. But what a lot of us are missing is a bit of marketing spirit in how we talk about learning. I mean, we can probably still recall those commercial jingles from our childhood or recognize specific brands just from their slogans. But to be fair, the content of a well-crafted training a couple of years ago, probably gone, vanished. So what is their magic? And what can we learn from marketing when it comes to training? We'll learn more about that today in our conversation with Bianca Baumann and Mike Taylor. Welcome both. Great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having us.
Great to be here. Thanks for having us.
This is actually our first online cafe recording. The first two episodes were live here at the Rotterdam headquarters. So I'm curious, because of course the previous guest, we gave them some coffee and some nice snacks. Is there anything, what did you do this morning or my afternoon to make your own cafe setting? Did you get a coffee? Did you get a tea? A little fireplace maybe in the corner of your room?
Well, it's a little too warm in Toronto for a fire, but I did have my tea to get started. I'm definitely a tea drinker, and now I have a big glass of water here to make sure I stay hydrated throughout our conversation. And very important, I have my cat on my lap, so that is like super perfect comfort right there.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I've been up
Very
for a
nice.
long time already, so I've transitioned from my morning coffee to water as well, and snacks are never out of reach. So
Perfect. I couldn't have wished for more. I have my cup of tea here as well, because I don't drink coffee in the afternoons. So happy to hear that we're all set. First of all, I'm very curious and interested. Let's start with a question that forces you to go probably back in time a little bit. So, why and when did you decide to pursue a career in learning in general? Can I start with you, Bianca?
Sure. I'm one of these people. I actually wanted to go into learning and development. So I'm not an accidental learning and development
As you see quite
professional.
often, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Which nothing wrong with that at all. But yeah, I'm originally from Germany and I went to university for a degree in business education. So it is a mix of an MBA and a master's in adult education. It's very specific to Germany because back there it actually allows me to, well, on one hand, work in a corporate environment, HR and L&D, but it also would have allowed me to become a teacher at a vocational school, which I started teachers college and I lasted a whole of 6 weeks, realizing, okay, this is not for me. I kind of want to go into the corporate world and see what I can do over there. So yeah, I really started this career many, 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 many years ago.
Cool. Yeah.
and I'm not sort of one of those rare rainbow unicorns like Bianca is. So I didn't even know that this field existed, but I've always been energized by the process of learning, even when I was a kid in school. And so I thought the only thing I knew was even a possibility. I thought a teacher or college professor or something like that. And so um, I kind of did take that left-hand turn when I discovered that it was a thing. It was, like the skies parting and the sun coming out, and was like a revelation that this was an exciting one, that this was a job that you could do and people would actually pay you for. So I'm like most people and sort of accidentally stumbled into it.
That's a great combination between the two of you. And then at some point, I think you found each other also in the marketing expertise, the marketing field, because for everyone who's listening, we haven't mentioned your book yet, but it's Think Like a Marketer, Train Like an L&D Pro, right? So you guys were at some point also thinking like a marketer. Where did that come from?
So when I first came to Canada 17 years ago, my first learning and development job here in Toronto was for a company called Eloqua, which is now part of Oracle. And it's an email marketing automation software, or revenue performance management, as we're supposed to call it. Um,
Interesting name.
and my job, yeah, I know, because I think the reason we were taught to call it revenue performance management is, it sounds much fancier,
Mm.
but also when you hear email marketing, everyone thinks about spam. So I think, it's just like a positioning thing, speaking about practicing what you're preaching. Anyway, my job was an education specialist. So I was actually teaching our customers how to be better marketers using the Eloqua software, but there was also some best practices in there as well. And while I was doing this job and teaching online, I realized, oh my gosh, there's so many parallels between learning and development and marketing. Mainly, we're really driving, in our case, learners, in marketing's case, users or customers, to do something, right? And for us, it's that behavior change. For marketers, it's usually to purchase a product or service. And I started blogging about it and thinking about it. And then it just kind of evolved into, well, what is now a book?
Cool. Yeah, and then at some point, Mike also joined that party.
Oh, absolutely. That's our get to know story. But I'll let Mike talk first about how he got into marketing, and then Mike,
Yeah.
you can just go into how we actually got to being in each
Yeah.
other's
And
lives.
so when I made the left-hand turn I talked about earlier, then I had spent 10 or 11 years or so in corporate learning, pretty traditional big company stuff. And then about the same time that Bianca was in her role, she was just talking about, then I spent 5 years doing L&D work for a digital marketing agency and had a similar light bulb go off in my brain of like, oh, there's a lot of this stuff. We're trying to do the same things. And, the two fields do it differently. And, I think a lot of times these marketing folks may have a leg up on us in many ways. And so that is a similar path to Bianca of having those combinations of the two different backgrounds.
Yeah. And then you felt there's this need. We'll have to write a book about this.
Well, and then the Learning Guild had a online event, and we were both speakers. And then at the end of the event, the closing event was a panel, and we were on the panel together. And we sort of realized like, hey, we're thinking a lot of the same things. We're aligned on kind of our view of this and all that sort of stuff. And we were messaging on LinkedIn, and I said, hey, we should do something together. And so that was the seed that started this whole path. And so, what is it? 8 years or going on 9 years later, the book is here, and all the other cool stuff that we've been able to do since.
Very, very cool how that came together, and very in a sort of organic, natural way as well. I'm curious, if we take a look at the marketing principles, what's your weirdest or maybe most unexpected inspiration from the world of marketing?
That's a great question. And I don't know that I have a specific instance that comes to mind, but if anybody is familiar with Rory Sutherland, so he is a marketing leader at Ogilvy, which is a advertising agency in the UK. And if you've never seen him speak, or he's got a really great book out as well, he he really talks a lot about how our brains don't work the way most people think they do, and how a lot of times, it might be total opposite of what intuition would tell you are the things that work. And so he talks about, trying these out of the box things and creative approaches. And for me, that's something that really sticks out, is that mindset.
And I think for me, I mean, now I know this, but back in the day, I didn't, that email can be so powerful. So that's definitely something I picked up at Eloqua, and just the concept of digital body language, which really means marketers can read all the things you're doing online, right? Like you navigate to a website, they already starting to capture information the moment you are on this website, even if it's just your IP address. And the moment you sign your soul away, meaning you enter your email address somewhere, they start combining the information they already have with the information they continue collecting about you, and then start sending you content, usually in email, that matches your needs in the moment of need. And yeah, when I learned that back in the days, I was like, whoa, this is amazing. And kind of helped, think about how we could leverage this here in learning and development as well.
Yeah. That makes it even more bizarre that we're still just pushing those linear one size fits all courses out, right? If we have all this expertise within the marketing field when it comes to personalization and just in time information. Yeah.
Yeah, and I say all the time, one size fits all usually means one size fits none.
Yeah, and I like what you said there, Bianca, also with sort of when it comes to the unexpected inspiration. I had it as well. I also saw marketing from the other side and like all the data that's been gathered and collected. I'm like, phew, I didn't know that as a consumer myself when I didn't get to experience that. What else is all out there?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think, as you're saying, it's so interesting that we don't pick up some of these processes here in L&D. And to be fair, marketing, I don't know how many years ago, they were just like learning and development. They had no way of showing return on investment, and they didn't know how many leads really came from a billboard or, whatnot. And then digital became a thing, and all of a sudden you have all these technologies moving into the marketing space, and all of a sudden the marketing function, the CMO function, really became this driving force in working closely with sales. And now, given all the technology that's available to them, they are able to show the return on investment, and they're really viewed as a very different function even than a couple of years ago. And they're also given more money because of that. And so I think it's important for us to remind ourselves that marketing wasn't always there, but it's also a great example of, hey, if they can do it, I think we can too.
and how should we do that?
That's a $1 million question.
Right? Yeah. How many
Yeah.
time do we have left? 2 hours? Let's go. No.
Oof, yeah, let's go, right? Well, I mean, there's a ton of different concepts you can borrow from marketing, and I wouldn't go straight to the technology. And I
No.
think that is just something in general in learning and development. I see that as a mistake in my mind, to go out and purchase whatever great platform is out there because it promises you that engagement of your learners will go up and behavior change this and ROI, and then you implement it and it doesn't do any of the things you thought it would do. Because without a proper strategy ahead of time, it doesn't really matter what technology you get in, and you've got to make sure it works with your entire tech stack anyway. So for me, it's really, getting to know your audience. What is it really that they need and want? And then from there, really figure out what content do we have? How do I want to actually strategize around that? What do we have? What do we need? Start writing better, using better visuals, and then kind of creating these learner journeys and learning campaigns to really make that learning come to life using technology, and then obviously measure what you're doing and continue to improve. So easy.
Ah, there you go. See, you did that in 1 minute. I mean, we don't even need those 2 hours. Yeah. Um, I think you touched upon a very good point, one that I also wanted to address, because I think that marketers are doing a really good job knowing their audience, right? Who they want to target and when, at what point, at what time, what they need. So how can we, in L&D or learning development, move beyond just knowing demographics and actually start to understand our learners? One of the things that I'm very familiar with, because my colleague Gert Ries, is the jobs to be done method, which actually also comes from marketing, which is a more in-depth method than just, for example, personas. Um, what do you think? How should we approach that?
Listen to the people around you. But yeah, personas is the vehicle to do it. To your point, there's obviously other ways of how you can do it. You have your empathy maps, which are, slightly less work. You have your persona, slightly more. And then obviously, you can kind of blow it up after that if you wanted to. But knowing the time and dollar restrictions we usually have on projects, no matter, what you're working on, is creating research-based learner personas is usually a great way to do that. So you identify first, like, you're within your target audience who has to take a certain program. Who are these people in general? You segment them, and that might be geographic, it might be job roles, and then from there you kind of dig a little bit deeper and sit down with them and interview them, or if you can't get them off the floor, so to say, send out surveys at a minimum and really gather information about them. What do they see? What do they hear? What do they do? What do they think and feel, which is the critical one, because there I can really now synthesize the pain points and then the needs of these learners, add a little bit of demographic information on top of it to make it more fun and give that persona personality, and then start using them throughout your design.
Yeah. And listen, mainly listen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds so simple, but yeah, especially when you do these interviews, have the same questions for everyone so you can compare apples to apples, but there will always be nuances, right? And read someone's body language too. Now it's great when you do virtual meetings. You can actually really focus on the person because most of us now have our AI note taker assistants, which is fantastic. So you don't have to, look down and scribble notes. You can really just focus on the conversation and really tune into the person in front of you.
And was there, in your time as learning and development specialist, also a moment where you got the audience completely wrong? So you misinterpreted your whole audience while developing a learning solution? And if so, what did that teach you?
I have one that it wasn't me getting it wrong. It was sort of an adjacent team who really got it wrong badly. So I used to work for American Electric Power, which is power generation. So big electricity, coal-fired power plants, usually in pretty rural places. And kind of one of the reasons that a lot of these compliance courses get a bad name is people don't understand the audience. And so they built this crazy big course, really heavy multimedia stuff. They had clearly never visited one of these power plants before because it's crazy loud, it's really dirty, there's equipment, and it's just this it's an incredible place. One of the key things that they didn't understand was the entire plant, so 100, 200 people, they're sharing a 64K internet connection. And this multimedia rich thing, it just won't work. It won't run at all. And so that's bad enough. But then when they try to track down the people who aren't taking it, so they're trying to literally keep the lights on. And we have these HR people who are calling them and kind of scolding them for not taking this course that doesn't work, so it's not possible for them to take it. And they clearly have no clue what that environment is like. And it's one of those things where you just hate to see it because people in organizations, they don't know that there are different training groups. It's just the training group. And so everybody is painted with that same brush, which is really unfortunate.
Yeah, on my end, I worked or supported an oil and gas company, and their training goal was goal zero, right? Like, imagine a plane very similar to what Mike was just saying, right? There's lots of spills and ladders and lots of opportunities to hurt yourself. And pure training just didn't get this organization to that goal zero. And so we took a step back and tried to identify what actually motivates these learners, because clearly they don't care enough about their own lives to be safe, because they know, right? They know if there's a spill to not walk into the spill, but around it. They know to put on a harness. So the issue was not that they don't know, they didn't do it. And so we just took a very different approach, which had nothing to do with training, but we asked them to put a picture of their loved ones at their locker, or, an area that they see every day. Because, like, okay, if you don't want to be safe for yourself, maybe you want to go home to these people, right? Or your cats or your dogs, or, your rubber duck or whatever it is. And that made a huge difference on that training program, or that actually not training program, on the output of, goal zero, the goal.
I love how in both these cases, you went from something that just didn't work to a whole outside the box idea, and created something else to make it work. Especially by visiting the place, by looking at what is important to them. So, like you said, Bianca, with the listen to them properly. My colleague Ger, that I've mentioned 2 or 3 times already by now, he talked about jobs to be done, but also about go to Gemba. And that means go to the place where the work is done, which is, I think, very relevant still, and very important takeaway for a lot of learning development people. Yeah.
Yeah. And I always say it's the worker, and the work environment, right? Those are the 3 things you really got to look at, because it has an impact on everything we do every day, including taking training courses.
Yeah. And I also think that maybe that's a whole different topic, but you also say don't necessarily talk about courses, but more thinking campaigns, right? But how does that start? And what's the first campaign-like thing someone can try when they go back to the office on Monday after listening to this podcast?
So I think one of the things that most people can sort of grab onto pretty easily is like onboarding. And we've all probably experienced a poor onboarding experience where it's an all day or an all week even, and it's just this tsunami of too much information, then you just can't process it, and you're just wiped out at the end. And so breaking that apart into manageable parts and pieces, and just drip feed, what do I need when? And Bianca mentioned email marketing tools, which is a great tool to manage that, and makes it really simple. So as a new hire, I can sort of plan things intentionally, get things before my first day, get things on my first day, and spread that stuff out, and give people a way to actually digest that and get the right stuff to the right people in the right time. And I think that's a really good example that sort of illustrates the type of thinking that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And I think if I may add to that, like, a learning campaign sounds like quite overwhelming, right? If you just hear the term, it can be very short, with kind of like some kind of an awareness piece to something, and then you have kind of like the main training piece, and then you have some kind of a follow-up. So other people might just call it a blended learning experience. But I think there are 2 things here. One, use the content you already have, as Mike was saying, and see how you can adjust it. An email might be one way of doing it, but you could still have your e-learnings in there, and you could still have your instructor-led sessions in there, and whatnot. But I also say the second point I want to make is think outside of the LMS box. It doesn't always have to sit on the LMS. I mean, email obviously is one of those examples, but I always like to share. It was a rather small campaign, but we kind of broke this out into, like, experiential marketing is something that inspires me when I think about solutions. And so we had a client who asked us about, we want to educate our headquarter, so automotive industry, our headquarter people on electric vehicles. So if you think about the what's in it for them, it's like, yeah, it's important to know, but in the end, right, like, the people that really know about these vehicles already, they know about them, and the others are kind of like, why do I need to know this? So we had to think about something better than the original ask, which was a 2-hour VILT session with a quiz after. And so we decided to make this a little bit more experiential, and we had a ton of promotion before this, and then we turned it into an expo, and it was still 2 hours, but we had 6 booths that people actually went through and experienced EVs on their own time. There were videos, there were some instructor-led sessions, like 10 minutes. There was a backsplash with QR codes where they could just engage. We had a movie night set up with like popcorn and everything and a lawn chair to look at the EV lifestyle. There was an event app with a scavenger hunt. And then there was some follow-up pieces to this in terms of performance support, basically. And we still had to do the quiz in the end, which, it is what it is. But so this could still be considered a campaign, right? Because you're really thinking in multiple steps, or it could be much bigger, as Mike was saying, multiple campaigns within your onboarding journey.
Great example. I love that one of all the combining all these different kind of things and yeah, thinking outside of your LMS. Yeah. If we look at marketing, one of the things that maybe a lot of people will also notice is that not every marketeer, of course, and I want to overgeneralize, but some of them create clickbait, right? 5 tips to this and 7 best tips to this, and just to get people to your website, and to make sure that people fill in these forms. How do you feel about that? And do you think we need that in learning to get people to our LMS, or do you think it's cheap and it won't resonate?
So I think that that's an important point that comes up fairly often, and I think the key to that is those clickbait things. They're using triggers to grab our attention, which I do think we should use and we should employ, in an ethical way. But the key point is once you do click or once you go register or whatever it is you want them to do, like you still have to deliver value. And it's the same thing that marketers might have a great campaign and it might get me to buy something, but if it's just a garbage product, I'm never going to buy it again. B, I'm probably going to tell everybody I know. And so the same thing is happening. If we have an amazing title to our course and people get in the course and it's garbage, the same thing's going to happen. They're not going to be likely to come back and they're going to tell everybody they know, don't waste your time.
So we can still learn
And
a lot from that. Yeah, but then use more marketing clickbait titles, but still add the value and make sure that the course is good.
I think it's important to remember that no one wants to log into their LMS. So, going back to delivering value, I would question if that is the right call to action, right? But what you should consider is not just when you're promoting something, but think about the course titles that you currently have or the titles for your training programs in general, if they're a little bit bigger. Like Compliance 101 is not very exciting. And in our workshops, we have this little exercise where we give people really boring titles and then we give them tools like headline analyzer tools. And now you can also just use, ChatGPT or Claude or whatnot to help you come up with more engaging titles. And then again, the value is there because hopefully your course is obviously nicely designed and it all works out. So yes, exactly. We're assuming that's the case. So so yeah, right. And I think it also just ties in with really learning in the flow of work. Our employees do not want to log into the LMS, right? They have a problem in the moment and they need a solution in the moment. And how can we actually support that? I know there's still the bigger training programs out there and they'll never go away, and that's okay too. But yeah, let's start thinking more, especially with AI now, how can I personalize that experience in the flow of work?
Has your marketing mindset, the way that you look at it, has it ever clashed with learning purists, for example, learning scientists?
Sure. I had a phone call with somebody at Nationwide on another learning team, and she wanted to know how do you get people to do outside of the box stuff, like instead of the traditional compliance sort of mindset that we're all probably familiar with. She's like, how do you do that? How do you get approval for that? And I think it's really important to understand that. A couple of things is one, it's we talk about this all the time, is if you want to try something new, call it a beta test or call it a trial or call it something else. And people sort of seem to, oh, okay, well, it's not threatening. We'll just try. So
Mm.
do some small experiments that will demonstrate, hey, not only is this effective, but people like it and people lean into that. And so when you can start finding things to show as proof, like, hey, we did this and it works, let's expand that. And people are always open if you offer better suggestions. So for example, if somebody comes to you and says, hey, we need a training course, yes, I can build a training course. And would you be interested in other better, cheaper, faster options? And so that's like an improv trick. You never say no, you say yes and it keeps that conversation kind of a collaborative one instead of, an oppositional one. And so things like that are really important, and I get those questions a lot.
Yeah, what I come across a lot is, oh, you're simplifying this. That just doesn't work, right? So people just kind of shut down. Marketing and L&D are so different, kind of going back to what I was mentioning about they have more money, they have more technology. And especially around learner personas, it's like, well, they won't solve all your problems. I'm the first one to admit that they don't, but they do get us closer to our target than a target audience analysis. And so, to Mike's point, I think the trick is when we hear these things to acknowledge, it's like, yes, I agree here, there are shortcomings. However, what we're trying to do is inspire and think differently. And it's not, our book is less, or our thinking is less about how to promote what you're doing, but to really tie marketing principles into your design to make it a better design and see better outcomes and impacts in the long run. And I think that's definitely always a good starting point to start with the end in mind. As Mike was just saying, like, wouldn't you like to do X, Y, Z?
Yeah, that makes total sense. Um, I want to go to more of some closing questions, and I want to first start with a reflection question on your own careers again, as I did in the beginning as well. So when you look back at your career, what's something that you wish you'd done more like a marketer earlier?
Yeah, so I can still remember the first online e-learning course I ever built. So I was working at the power company, and it was the thrilling topic of pH and water chemistry in a power plant. So crazy complex stuff. And at the time, I was not as in tune with my audience, and so I remember, oh gosh, this is kind of boring. We need to jazz it up. We've all probably heard those kind of requests of, hey, just jazz this up a little bit. And then, I recognized at some point looking back, that's not what we're talking about when we say all of these marketing things. It's not extraneous stuff that we're trying to jazz up anything. It's really, simplify, make sure it's useful and relevant, and hopefully it resonates with the people emotionally and it makes them care about it. And so I think that's a really important distinction. It's not just running around, adding clip art and jazzing things up, but there's really meaningful goal and targets in there that we're shooting for.
I think for me, I wish I would have started to actually practice what I preach earlier. And it was like I was thinking about it, I was talking about it, but I didn't necessarily bring it into my work because there were so many naysayers. And there still are, right? As I just talked about. And so kind of standing my ground. But I think it also, I needed the years and the experience to fine tune the messaging and really understand it for myself in order to show up as that person in meetings and be comfortable to push back and be comfortable to suggest things that are out of the box. And up until this day, I'm still learning, for one, but also sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And, we're just working on a client project where we actually proposed a campaign, and it's actually for a marketing team. So it's like, hey, you guys get this. And now we're in the middle of it. And everything changed so much that the original idea behind the campaign has actually been out the window for at least 2 months. And so, right, so to just also be okay with that, because sometimes clients, they might get it and then you go into it and they just fall back into their old patterns, and there's only so much you can do as an L&D professional to push it and to know when you should stop pushing and just accept that this is not going anywhere, and focus your efforts on where you can make a change and a difference and call it a pilot or whatnot. So, and I'm just sharing this that, even today, I'm not always successful bringing these campaign and marketing ideas to the audience, but if it works, it's amazing.
Yeah. And what kind of people inspire you from the marketing field? Is there someone you're looking up to when you have those meetings? Like, oh, I'm gonna see if this person has some insights that I can use in my client project, for example.
Yeah, so I mentioned Rory Sutherland earlier, and
Mm-hmm.
he's really fantastic. Just the mindset, it really aligns with a lot of the stuff we're talking about. Seth Godin is somebody, he spoke at the ATD conference a couple weeks ago. Again, just unique perspectives and thinking outside of the box and being creative in the way they approach things for me.
No big names on my end necessarily. I signed up to marketingprofs.com, great website, great resources. So I just get their newsletters and get inspired by that. Also, I still have a very strong network of marketers because I used to work at Eloqua. So following them on LinkedIn, seeing what they're doing, like that inspires me. And yeah, that's where I get most of my inspiration from, is really just seeing what these people are doing in real life. And as much as I love being inspired also by Seth Godin, as Mike was saying, for example, sometimes it feels a little abstract, and it might be too far-fetched for what we're doing, well, what's actually happened day to day in an office. So that's why, for me, I really rely on my personal network and marketingprofs.com, and the content, what's it called? Content Strategy Institute, I
Content
think.
marketing institute.
So it's great resources. Thank you.
Yeah,
I thought
Content
something
Marketing
sounds
Institute,
off.
really
Content
good.
Marketing Institute. Yeah. Yeah. So they have some amazing resources as well to get inspired.
I'll make sure to include all those in the show notes, and of course, a link to your book, Think Like a Marketer, Train Like an L&D Pro. I definitely recommend everyone to take a look at that book to improve your own skills when it comes to using marketing in learning and development. Before we really round off, I've got a couple of fun questions that I cannot ask all of them, but I do want to ask a couple. And for one of them, Mike, you do not get a choice, because I just want to ask you that one. Because I read your Friday Finds every week. I love all the insights I get from it, especially with the new format. You give the more longer summaries, and that's really something I admire. But there's also one little part that I've sometimes also sent you an email about, for example, the playlist of Dido, which has been in my algorithm for 2 weeks now, and my girlfriend's getting insane. But
Sorry
that's
about that.
a whole other discussion. No, that's okay. She's okay with that. But I thought of a question when it comes to sort of a learning jingle. So if you get to launch a training campaign with a theme song, what would be your pick and why?
Oh gosh, that's super hard, Roy. You're not giving me any
I
easy
know.
ones. So
No, of
I
course
don't
not.
know specifically, but I love my favorite musical sort of thing is when somebody takes an old song and remakes it in a new genre. And so, for example, I did a webinar with TechSmith yesterday morning, and they had the coolest. It was the Mario Kart theme song that somebody had remixed and done in another style. And then they also had like the Star Wars theme in another style. So it would be something recognizable but new in that sort of remaking kind of context.
All right. So leave the original song in its own context, but then
Yeah, just
reiterating it a bit so that it fits your own.
yeah. So it's
Your own.
creative and new and different, but
Exactly.
recognizable.
But then still two questions. if you pick a number between 1 and 8, and you cannot say 2 because that's the question I just asked you, Mike, what number would it be
4.
for you,
Oh,
Bianca?
sorry. Go ahead.
Oh,
I hope you don't take 4.
Uh, I'll no, you can take 4. I'll take 6.
you'll take 6. All right. That's about your first learning crush. So what was the first piece of learning, either a course, a teacher, or a workshop, that made you think, wow, this really works?
It was actually, I worked at the bank at the time. It was my first role, first people manager role, and I had to go through people manager training. And it was a Blanchard course on situational leadership, which is still around up until this day. But I still think about this experience a lot. It was a face-to-face over a couple of days, which I'm like, oh gosh, like I was not looking forward to it. But the facilitator was amazing. The people I was learning with were great. And I got so much out of this experience that I'm still using up until this day. So that was definitely, yeah, big crush there.
And what then made that so? Was it the emotion? Was it that moment?
It was the mix of the right
Mix.
people, the right facilitator, the content made sense to me, like the whole concept of, yeah, depending on what the situation is, as the name says, right? You manage your people differently and recognizing what situation you're in, the person who's sitting in front of you, what they need, what they don't need, right? To just not have that one style, but to really, yeah, be that coach and mentor when it's needed, be the micromanager when it's needed. So but yeah, it was really the people, the exercises, the facilitators.
It all clicked.
Yeah, it was just, yeah, it just all clicked. It all worked. And the food was good too, which I know is always one of those things, right? So that didn't hurt. So
Yeah. So on the evaluation, on the smile sheet, you said, I like lunch. Yeah.
exactly. I like
Yeah.
lunch. That was my only feedback I had. So
Perfect.
I'm sure it's really valuable. Yes.
Yes, exactly. Great example.
Oh.
And Mike, you picked number
Yep.
4. That's about your least favorite trend. So what is a popular L&D trend that you would love to stay in marketing terms, unsubscribe from?
So I don't know if it's a trend, but it's been around for a long time and still remains for some unknown reason. And that's every time I hear the learning styles thing, I and I have to when using AI tools, the very first thing I do is go in and put in the instructions of never, ever, ever, ever mention learning styles. And so it's unfortunate that, it's still taught in some educational academic circles. And I kind of get a little bit because it's sort of intuitive, but it's just so bad and wrong that
That's not true.
yeah, and it just needs to go.
That's a good one and a persistent myth. So let's get that out of the world as soon as possible. All right, time is flying and up. I want to thank you both for joining me today on the Training Improvement Café, and everyone at home. Also, thanks for listening or watching to another episode of the Training Improvement Café. This time with Bianca Baumann and Mike Taylor, where we talked about marketing and your new book, Think Like a Marketer, Train Like an L&D Pro. So make sure to get that book and to be inspired. Thanks both, and thank you for watching and viewing, and I hope to see you at the next one.
Thank you, Roy.
Thank you, Roy.